Got it. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us this Thursday morning, our monthly group meeting, and looking to exchange as much information as we can. I'll go ahead and blow this slide up so we can talk about the agenda. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on, or maybe a lot about what's going on at the statewide level. Go through current funding opportunities, talk about the approach of the consortium. We're going to talk some about Santa Barbara County and some of the things going on up there, allow everybody to provide any updates that they have, and then anything else that we haven't had a chance to cover. In terms of introductions, let me just go through and see who I've got on the register. And I want to just thank you for being here. We do note that you're here. We keep it in our records. The fact that we do, this happens to be names of our last meeting, and I've been typing away, and so far got Sasha Burrows with the consortia, Greg Hayward, Trackable Health. Greg, I don't know if you have any other companies that you also highlight in terms of your other entrepreneurial interests. Petra Gomez, Santa Barbara County Community Foundation, George Amendola, Cyberdynamics, Brian Chung, City of Moore Park, Monica Gibbs, AT&T, Noel Heredia, Digital Value Creations, Randall Hernandez, Verizon, Nikki Mays with the City of Santa Paula, Steve Sawyer, Charter Communications, myself, Terry Theobald with the County of Ventura, Steve Weingart with Ridge Communications, and Jory Wolf with Magellan Advisors. Did I leave anybody out? Did I capture everybody? So, as I mentioned, our purpose is just to catch up. It's kind of like having the cup of coffee and seeing what's going on and making sure we're all on the same page, keeping up with all the things that are happening as they happen pretty fast. And I'll pause here just to talk about the fact that these are changing times. I'm going to get Joe here just to make sure I don't lose him. He just joined us, Joe Corella, also with Magellan. I think there's a lot of discussion about what is the future of the consortia. And frankly, from our standpoint, we've got about 14 months in terms of our current funding. We're either going to be in business in a big way, or we'll probably be overcome by all the events that are occurring. Because I think if you wanted to start a consortia today in today's climate, we'd say, why do you need it? Because there's so much visibility and collaboration is already occurring in a natural way. And so we're really trying to figure out with a number of consortia across the state, what is the future going to look like and how is this all going to happen? And I think we'll be drilling down and talking about that as we continue to go. Funding everywhere. It's 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we put a chart and you'd have a little bit of USDA over here or some CSF over there, but a little bit of NTIA here and there. Completely different climate post-COVID. And so all of these things are areas where we are continuing to be plugged in, to stay aware of where things are at, to be tracking the latest and how they all play together. We were in a conversation yesterday. Jory Wolf is going to be giving us a presentation October 12th about a lot of this in terms of status and the process, and they all play together, and how they play together is an interesting conversation, and so that's kind of something to continue to follow. Our job right now, and the way we're seeing ourselves, is all about these kinds of conversations. It's about convening stakeholders. It's about really, everybody's gotten the memo. Broadband is on the radar. And now what do you do with it? And how do you go about doing what you do as a community, as a region? And so the first step in the whole process is convening. And I think that from there we go into the middle mile infrastructure, and this might be a good. I'll cue up Terry Theobald and Jory to start talking about the middle mile conversations in Ventura County. Once the stakeholders have met, and Jory has done a masterful job of herding stakeholders in Ventura County for the middle mile network discussion. It's getting to a point where you get to be shovel ready, if you will. and develop the middle mile infrastructure. What we're grappling with now is how do you take the middle mile, get it funded, and get to the point of solving last mile issues based on middle miles being a catalyst. And so as we peel back the onion and get closer to the core and actually how you do that, that's something we're going to want to develop. We're going to want to document. We're going to want to share as a best practice. And those conversations are trickling back up statewide to best practices. And so I'm a fan for the local perspective. I really, if we can do this here and we can do it well, we can share that information and you can do it anywhere. And so, Terry, I don't know if this is probably a good time to invite you to just, give a little bit of an update on what's happening in Ventura County and in your view of the world of today.
Sure. So Ventura County, I have gotten about half my Halloween decorations moved down into the office. So we're ready to do that. And my light show is on order. So that's the important stuff, on to these other matters related to broadband and whatever. I can give you an update on that. So I think the biggest news for us is and Jory will give a lot more specifics than I'm going to give, but as everything he's going to say translates to us, I don't think we're particularly concerned about what happens at the CPUC anytime soon. They're going through their machinations. Everybody believes it's going to take a while, and a while is measured in years, not months. The feds are supposed to vote on the federal infrastructure bill this month. And then it will take some time to run that through the process. And I've heard estimates going out to 2024 before funding would actually be able to be put in somebody's hands. And then there's a kind of a discussion going on right now, whose hands would it go into? And I think several people in the SCAG group think that traditionally the federal money goes to the state, so the CPUC would get it. So they would get the $4 or $5 billion that we asked for Southern California, and the CPUC would then decide what they want to do with it, which may not be the same thing that we asked for, at least not focused solely on Southern California. So the big news, the big actionable news, I think is, and I could have this wrong, is based on our reading of the recent SB4 legislation that passed the Assembly. The CPUC is required to give $5 million to each county for a final mile, which is interesting. So we could go ahead and invest in some of our needy communities, our underserved, disadvantaged communities with that $5 million. So how would we go about that? And that's something that we've just started conversations on internally. And I think that's the main news I have from Ventura County. Don't forget Halloween and Christmas. I mean, that's the important stuff.
Terry, similar to that, I was in a statewide consortium meeting with the California Forward people earlier this week, and Ron Osborne from CPUC was talking about that $5 million. And there's some, as we get into the mix of rulemaking, there's some question about whether that's an allocation or a check. Does $5 million show up at your doorstep, or is there a series of projects you'll have to apply for? And activities that you'll have to say, we need to do this, and then it's a sliding scale where it'll be up to $5 million in terms of allocations, maybe more for some areas, less for other areas. And have you gotten any other readings on that kind of outlay?
Just got briefed on this last week. Okay. Honestly, well, obviously if it's a check, then my guess is the check would go to the county. If it's an allocation and there's applications, then one might argue that any government in the county could apply for it. Yeah. And that's where I think the consortium comes into the picture, because then we need to have some level of coordination if everybody's scrambling for the $5 million, and we'd want to make sure that the criteria at a county level, the criteria is being met. I don't think the county is particularly concerned. I'm going to say it this way. I think that everybody agrees that we need to focus on underserved and disadvantaged. We keep saying that over and over again. So if we pick a county underserved area or a city underserved area, I think county's perspective would be, as long as we're addressing an underserved area, would probably be, we should all be on board with that. But I don't know any more than that.
Yeah. So one of the other aspects to this that I'll share with you is I got a call from somebody up north, or an email yesterday, Santa Barbara County, and you know, they were actually talking about the interest of municipal fiber ownership. And you know, the question was, you know, should the public sector be involved in you know, actually providing broadband service? And my position was basically, I go back to the analogy that we've talked with in the past. It's a matter of, yes, you know, there is a role for the public sector to be maintaining roads, if you will, and have roads and provide for roads and to make sure that the roads have capacity and those kinds of things. On the other side, we're not wanting the municipal partners necessarily to be in the transportation business at all. You know, if we can provide the roads into these areas and let the providers provide the services, I mean, that's the best of both worlds. You know, any comments about that? Am I speaking out of turn?
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think the county's view would be, if we didn't have to maintain roads and some private sector could do it for less money, let's do it. Because then there would be a, you know, however they would accomplish that. But that's not what happens, right? There aren't the only, and you know, the toll roads would be an example. Those are typically, you know, government run operations, but sometimes they're not, you know, and they serve their purpose. So I think I know the county's position is, we don't really want to be in the municipal middle mile business for purposes of providing final mile internet to the public. We do want to be in the municipal middle mile business for government communication. I just like I wouldn't trust 5G, general 5G for law enforcement. I think 5G for public consumption of internet is great. But I would want a private 5G network if I was willing to go 5G at all. And the same thing here. I want my own fiber for my own county purposes. I do not want to rely on private business to provide me internet on a daily basis for government functions, or to interconnect my own facilities at some cost. So that's why we're still pushing for the county middle mile projects, because I believe we need to have fiber in the ground for county business purposes and cost management of our internet connection. And if, oh, by the way, it can support underserved areas because it, as some of the communication providers have said, doesn't pencil out, then I would say, sure, I think we should look at that. That would be not our first choice, but I've explained to everybody I've talked to, and there seems to be support for it, that if we can't get a private partner to do this because it's not economically feasible, then we have to step up. I don't know what other choice we have. We put it on an RFI asking for information, and no one stepped up to say, yes, you know, we will take care of this. It was more like, we have capacity, we have capability, and it kind of needs to pencil out for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Bill, just to add into that again, Randall Hernandez with Verizon. You know, I think Terry's raised a lot of great issues, and to me, it really stresses the importance of organizations like BCPC around the convening. Because the most important thing I think needs to happen is the continuous public-private sector discussion. Because what we don't want to do is end up replicating infrastructure that's already in the ground between private and public. You have three major providers on this call right now, us, AT&T, and Charter, that are expending billions of dollars on an infrastructure. Now, from the Verizon perspective, we agree that at times there may be a need for that public sector backbone, as long as there's open access, and as Terry talked about, that we can then tap into it, provide 5G service, and do the home broadband into those really difficult communities that are hard to reach, or through our macro facilities. But again, that's a matter of us continuing to share that kind of dialogue and information along the way, so that we can make sure those public sector resources are used in the most effective manner and not replicating private sector projects.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, I just want to add to Randall's comment. I think he makes a great point, and I didn't make it well enough. So when we've been talking about our middle mile, I don't think we've ever talked about it as being exclusive. Our goal would be to lead the charge on providing middle mile capability for our purposes along strategic routes. And we would want to, and that's why we did the RFI, to see who would be interested in partnering with those routes. Because our view would be, we would want to make sure we had county-owned fiber in the trench or along the aerial or however we're going to do it. And if there are other partners that want to take advantage of that dig and put their fiber in there, or if they want to lease a conduit from us, however we want to do it, we absolutely would support that. Absolutely.
Randall, you've got and you and Monica both, are tracking pretty closely what's happening at the statewide level, and and in all of the sausage making, rule making, if you will, in all these areas versus what's happening at the local level. And my biggest concern is, I keep thinking that there's going to be a need for alignment. We've spent a number of years now planning out the middle mile, and we're essentially to a point where we're shovel ready. But at the same time, there's conversations occurring yesterday of the statewide middle mile network, and we're really not wanting to reinvent the wheel. And how do you create this alignment from on high versus what's happening at the local level, in a meaningful way? We're having a lot of local conversations, very concerned that we're going to start over again and reboot. And instead of being able to get down the road tomorrow because we're ready today, we're going to have to wait for the next couple of years while the folks up north are figuring out what needs to happen from their perspective. Any thoughts about?
Well, a couple of things for the industry. First and foremost, obviously, we're going to have to manage this thing county by county. I mean, Ventura County has really got a lot of momentum, clearly, and you guys have done a lot of pre-planning already. Our friends in Santa Barbara County aren't as enlightened at this stage, and they're just sort of not coming to the game and realizing they need to have a better broadband plan. So we know we're going to have to do that county by county. While there's a lot of public sector dollars out there, my continuing refrain is always, there's a lot of private sector dollars that are ready to be deployed today. Again, and that's a matter of us working day to day with municipalities and breaking down those barriers so that we can move those private sector dollars just as quickly as possible. But I wish I could tell you I had all the details on what's happening at the state, that the sausage making continues.
Yeah.
You talked about it correctly, the PUC. Who knows what comes out of the end of that one? But I think, again, BCPC is doing the right thing, is trying to get these entities organized and convened and start laying out, here's our wish list plan, if you will. And then so you're ready once the money comes available and there's more clarity on what it's going to fund.
Yeah, I was taking some notes, just getting ready for this conversation. We've got municipal conversations occurring. We've got middle mile conversations occurring. We've got a rural conversations occurring, an urban conversation, and then an inclusion conversation. I mean, and that's just off the top of my head. I mean, but they all seem to be happening in separate quarters. And it's a matter of how do you link these conversations together, because they all are codependent. They all need to integrate at some point, and and I think that integration is all local. That we're trying to solve our problems and not be dealing with these diverse inputs coming in from different agencies or different funding providers in those.
Hey, absolutely. We're excited like you are that just finally broadband is on everybody's radar screen. I mean, we're even having a very productive conversation with the transportation entities, including Caltrans, who now realize, hey, they've got a role to play in this as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about that? So interesting. Any other thoughts? This has been a great.
Bill, I put it in the chat, but is there a way to get a copy of the results from that RFI, Terry?
I was just typing the answer. So so there are no formal documentation of the analysis or results. Basically, we just reviewed it. It was just for our information to see what was being submitted that would inform us on how we'd want to approach our next step, which would be an RFP. In order to share the submissions, my belief is the submissions are considered proprietary, that when a proposal is submitted, it has confidential information. I think procurement doesn't they have to share the contract that's approved, but I don't think procurement normally shares the individual submissions with the proprietary data on them. But I can check with them and see if they're able to share that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Jory, I'm going to put you on the spot. You made an interesting comment in a meeting yesterday about, as I vented the same thing, the same frustration that I had, and you felt that it was very unique, perhaps, to some of the areas here in California. But, in certain communities, in certain areas you've seen here on the West Coast, things are moving swimmingly, for lack of a better term, really pretty well. But because we are where we're at, and, we're part of what we're part of, this stuff is going to take a little bit more time to get worked out and worked through. Can you elaborate on that or correct me in terms of how I might have characterized that conversation that you shared yesterday?
Absolutely, Bill. And good morning, everyone. I think it's really important to understand that we can get shovel ready, and Ventura County certainly is shovel ready. They have a really solid master plan, and they have really a dictate going forward from leadership and from the county board. They definitely want to take care of the lack of investment in certain areas of Ventura County. We've identified those, and we've identified routes how to get there. And we've got some partners that are interested in going along the way and filling various capacities. The matter at hand really is eligibility and money. And eligibility to obtain grants. And California is unique in many ways, especially when it comes to the ability to obtain federal monies for rural areas, for tribal areas, for economic development, for agriculture, for USDA, for Reconnect, for Community Connect, and many of these federal programs which have been around for a while, and then new and emerging programs that are now available. California, compared to other, especially Southern California, I should say, and non-rural counties are really finding it more difficult to become eligible for many of these programs. And then you also need to understand each one of these grant-funded programs and what is available. Many of them, for example, EDA, where you could apply for economic development, and you could find eligibility for low population centers within Ventura County for job creation, for business development and the like, really only has a sweet spot of around $3 to $3.5 million. So when you're talking about building a significant middle mile network, your funds that are available to you are somewhat limited. So you of course need to go for multiple sources. Which complicates things because now you're building things in small segments, which raises the cost, but also changes the landscape in terms of partnerships possibly, and also filings and starts and stops with long periods of delays in between because of the sources of funding are coming at different times. But then at the same time, there are areas where there are like Community Connect, where we have populations under the threshold of 15,000 and 20,000, where we can apply for those monies. And because of the number of unserved or underserved households meets criteria, we can make that case and apply for those funds. But then again, now we've got multiple funding sources coming in with multiple timings, and trying to use these small amounts of money for last mile with middle mile becomes a really complicated exercise. That is really not so much the case, of course, in rural counties in California, or even in rural counties in other states. I won't bother telling you about our experience in other states, but we can tell you that it is tougher in California because we have these very large population centers with very large certain numbers of service providers and small pockets of underserved communities. So filling in those small pockets and getting the eligibility criteria met to bring in these grants to do that work is more challenging than larger unserved rural areas that are contiguous.
Yeah. It's ironic as you were rattling off all the various different types of grants and agencies and all this, we wouldn't have had this conversation a couple of years ago. I mean, it's just the thought that, we're lining up different sources and trying to mix and match and pull that all together in a cohesive way is a completely different problem than that's where we're just looking for somebody that would fund something.
But please know that, that we have a shovel-ready plan in Ventura. Ventura, the county of Ventura has done an excellent job working with the cities, working with other public agencies, with the EDC, with VCTC, and Terry's been leading the charge in a fantastic manner. And there's been a lot of cooperation and support from city managers, from the board of commissioners, from IT managers, from economic development managers. I think over 140 some odd people have gotten on board and literally want this to move forward. So we strongly believe that we're going to be going after grants, and we're now focusing on where's the money and bringing in the money. And we've got 2 grant companies that we're bringing to the table and working on various new grant opportunities, not just the ones that I mentioned before, but other grants which have much higher dollar amounts. And these are coming from the state. So you'll be seeing us talking about state grant opportunities, which are just, the NOFOs are just coming out. And we'll have an understanding of eligibility criteria and the guidelines to submit those applications within the next 30 days.
Any questions? Thank you, Jory. Appreciate the update. Let me move on and talk a little bit about Santa Barbara County. We've got a meeting before the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday, I believe, coming up, and they're looking at their ARPA funding, and they're wanting to put aside some funds for the development of a broadband strategy. And Randall had mentioned the fact that Santa Barbara has been behind the curve, and now they're wanting to catch up, and we're welcoming them to that. Part of the presentation, though, is focusing in on what's happening elsewhere in the county. And to give credit where credit is due, the Chumash tribe last year began putting together a broadband strategy for the reservation. And so they saw a lot of opportunity. They were part of the consortia. We did broadband provider speed dating, a couple of years earlier, and the tribe has really been moving out. They got funding for that strategy. They put a strategy together. They've now applied for NTIA. This last week, they got a grant from CASF. They've been able to mix and match, and there's a vision of creating this North County fiber ring through the San Ynez Valley that goes, from it's going to include Vandenberg along the 154, and just doing interconnects. The Frontier came in and did an ask for CSF for connection up into the mountains with Cuyama, which is a hard to reach rural area, and so we're moving forward. And the message we're trying to give the supervisors up there is, it's great to have one portion of your community going off and doing this, but the whole, it really does need the county-wide perspective. We need to do, as much as you're doing some good things in the north, what's happening in the south, and how does the north and the south play together? And Terry has been quite, a leader as well, as saying, not only do the counties need to play with as a county and the municipalities in the county, but how do the counties play with each other in terms of the Ventura County and San Luis Obispo County, and because there is some interplay that should happen in terms of infrastructure between the counties. And so that's where we're hoping the consortium is able to foster the discussion, the level of being tri-counties and how we can be connecting to assets within our neighbors. As well as how do you be integrated within the counties and all the communities in the county. And so highlighting for the Board of Supervisors next week, what's happening in the north, and trying to ask and suggest that the imperative exists that if this be countywide, that what is happening in the north needs to happen throughout, is part of the message we're taking forward. And so the tribe has an EDA SEDS, economic development strategy. And they submitted a grant to do some planning as it relates to the North County fiber ring that they've envisioned up there. They've just submitted the NTIA grant at the beginning of the month, and they're moving out, but it's absent knowing where the pieces connect elsewhere throughout the county. And so we're suggesting that the rest of the county needs to catch up. And so it's a very interesting situation, and we're going to be wanting to, Terry's doing what Terry's doing in the middle mile here. We're going to want to connect to what's happening up there. And the same goes true with San Luis Obispo County. And as part of this conversation, not only are we talking with the supervisors, but SB-CAG, which is very similar to a VCTC. It's the Association of Governments within Santa Barbara County. And the subject comes up of governance. They're primarily, like VCTC, a transportation group. And they want to know if they can be pulling together communities throughout the county as if you've got physical roads, can you also be having a similar dialogue about the virtual roads, the virtual highway, the fiber assets that interconnect? And I think the answer is yes, but we're going to have to grow into that conversation and really figure out what that looks like and how that works. So any questions, any comments or observations, sharing of lessons learned related to this? I think that it's interesting. I'm really happy that we can show them some stuff, they can show us some stuff, and then we can start talking about doing stuff together. Terry, you got to unmute there, my friend.
Can you see if my hand's raised?
It is raised.
Okay, good. Just making sure. First of all, I have to thank Bill and Terry. I mean, they're probably giving me a lot more credit than I deserve. I'm just an impatient guy, and I want internet in my neighborhood. So everybody that's willing to help, I'm just going to keep pushing on those until I can get my way. But the reason I raised my hand, so thank you for that. The reason I raised my hand is because I was recently up at Solvang for a meeting, and what was kind of amazing to me, and I wasn't aware of it. I don't recall hearing about it. But I remember seeing the beginnings of it a couple years ago. So somewhere up the 101 around Muscle Shoals, Lock and Cheetah, construction starts along the 101. And it goes all the way up through Carpinteria, through Summerland, up to the edge of, I want to say close to where the zoo is. And there's dirt there. I mean, they've torn the road up and there's dirt there. And I was just wondering, given this is construction along one of these north-south major arteries, is fiber being laid in the ground there? Does anybody know?
I don't think anybody knows. I've talked with those groups several years ago, and at that point in time, they weren't. And it would have been, because we were talking specifically about that, and could you and should you? And the plans from Caltrans had been done 7 years earlier. And that was at a point in time in which this newfound collaboration hadn't yet been established. And so I could have changed, but at that point in time, the answer was no.
All right. Well, now that Caltrans is part of this other meeting that I'm part of, I guess I can just ask them. I mean, they've done those things, where they expand the road on the sides and they start doing stuff, laying asphalt or concrete on the sides, and then they tear up the middle. So all along this road, there's large sections of dirt, either on the outside or the inside. So I understand it would probably mess them up and require some redesign work. But given where this thing is, if somebody wanted to do a 3 foot deep, 1 foot wide trench to throw in several conduits, I wouldn't think it would be that big of a deal. What do I know? But if we don't know, I guess I'll ask them and find out if anybody's doing anything, and if not, why not?
Well,
hey Terry, we're doing some relocation work there for some of our comm customers, relocating existing to accommodate the road widening. I haven't seen any evidence of anything beyond relocating and reconfiguring existing comms. Nothing new going in, to my knowledge.
All right, thank you.
I just want to share, as I recall a couple of years ago, Caltrans said that from this point forward, we will be incorporating fiber cables, or at least conduit, And for active projects on that book on the books, which that one would have been in that time frame, there was you had to reach this point. If you're past this magical point, then you're too far gone. You're not being amended. Anything prior to that point would be amended to include that.
Sure. Thanks, Brian.
I'm a student of organizational change, and when I had this conversation with Caltrans, it was no. But then, a year and a half ago, they brought in Elizabeth Dewar at the top level, and she was saying yes, yes, yes. And then you go down to the district level and they'd say no. And then about 6 months later, you go to Elizabeth, and then you go to the district level and they'd say yes, yes. But then you get below the district level and they'd say no. And so, you can see the progression, but it's taking a long time for the organization as you get down deep into it to get the memo. And so I know the leadership is saying, yes, we need to collaborate. We need to do this together. But the execution of that collaboration, I know it's doesn't exist in the previous projects because that was done under the old school. But, I think they're still trying to figure out how to change and adapt. The stuff that, we're all talking about related to SCAG and the digital divide. I mean, it's the good stuff. It's the right stuff. We need to do that stuff. But I'm still waiting to figure out how the bureaucracy of it all is going to play out, because collaboration is not something that we've grown up with. We're having to figure out how to make it work and how to do it together. So, okay, I'm going to keep moving on. We've already talked quite a bit about the middle mile as a catalyst, and I think that I want to make the point that in Ventura County, we're really focusing in on Santa Paula is one of the communities, and South Oxnard is one of the communities. There's a lot of interest, a lot of excitement, a lot of things happening in the Guadalupe area, it's right on the border of Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties, and that community is really taking an active interest in doing some neat things in broadband. But and I think we talked about this in the last meeting, just getting people to realize that middle mile is opening the door for the last mile discussion. It's opening the door for a number of providers to get access. It's opening the door for community officials to start coming up with the local strategies that they're going to have to own and execute. We're still figuring out how to do that. I think that it's yet to be determined what those models are going to look like, and how those funds are going to arrive and be distributed. So just wanted to share with the fact that we're talking about pilots. We're wanting to develop the pilots. I was looking at what a pilot might involve this morning. But it's going to take some time to socialize and get the support and share that information among all the stakeholders to get agreed upon approaches and stuff. Okay. And then I want to just mention third eye, if you will, in terms of our school, our three-legged stool is infrastructure, inclusion, and innovation. There's an event next week happening down here in the South at the Port of Wainimi. The exercise is coming to a close. Brian Chung and Moorpark have been following innovation and leading out in the way of thinking about what to do with their street lights. And Greg Hayward's been an advocate of the innovation process. I'm sure they'll be looking and watching and being involved not only this year but next year in some of the smart city tech that we're going to be wanting to move forward. It comes together every fall after a year of conversations and collaboration, exercise, testing, and evaluation. And then this year's activities come to an end this next week with the Technology Expo. So those were the thoughts that I had prepared for today's meeting. At this point, I'll open it up to other discussions you might want to have, topics that you might want to discuss, things you're thinking about.
I just wanted to share a quick Moorpark update with regards to the state middle mile network. So as most, if not all of you on the call know, we are pursuing actively Meet Me Room. Our market study from Magellan is just finishing up, and we have set aside for our council discussion purposes using ARPA funds for construction of the Meet Me room. So that decision is probably not coming for a couple of months because it's batched together with everything else we're doing with ARPA funds. But that is a very high likelihood to happen. The state is seeking comments, partly for more the logistical stuff and distribution of funding for the project, which Jory and Terry spoke about earlier. But the other part of their seeking comments is to identify infrastructure that would be helpful to them as they route it. And for Moore Park, with regards to the Meet Me room, we got some very good news because at least their preliminary map shows them going along State Route 23 here in Moore Park, which is literally the street that City Hall is located on. So that, that line, if it gets into the final proposal, will be just a few hundred feet from our Meet Me room. So we did submit formal comments to the PUC advising them that by the time they would ever get around to constructing their network, we would have a Meet Me room available for them to connect to. So we have shared that feedback with them.
Brian, Greg, I'm going to ask, I asked Sasha some time ago to put me together a graphic about streetlights. And you might just take a few minutes to talk about, some of the conversations you've had or thoughts you've had related to streetlights. Moore Park is one of those communities that owns their streetlights. And so we've been, as it relates to the innovation process, we've been talking about how could you create a demo test site for streetlight technology and really become a localized place where we could play with toys, technology toys. Thank you, Sasha, for putting this graphics together. But, I wanted to know if Greg or Brian, you'd want to share your thoughts about this conversation.
I'm glad to speak about this. We have a unique opportunity to not only bring people together to allow them to demonstrate solutions, we can actually help them integrate their solutions on site at the port. And so, we're not looking at an isolated incident of this event. This will be an ongoing work, and the data that it's producing and the opportunities and those kind of things will be cataloged so that we can show people value. And this will just be the first platform that our companies that are participatory can take advantage of. And this year in particular is exciting, not only because this is the inaugural event for being able to show off smart solutions that are outside of the defense tech area, which Coastal Trident traditionally has focused only on, but there's a company called NVIDIA, and they are a multi-billion-dollar company, and they offer digital twins and modeling solutions and all kinds of really innovative opportunities for cities and the port and all these different factions to be able to really expedite their modeling and all sorts of different things in a virtual setting, the metaverse. So very exciting, a lot of value. There is no real overhead. It's very minimal to participate. So, we're going to work out that kind of stuff. But the city of Moore Park and Brian was very generous about connecting us with Siemens, and Siemens got excited and they gave us a very good deal on the opportunity to get a light post out there. But the port as well has agreed to allow us access to an existing light post that is positioned above a parking lot and a transition way for people. So there's a lot of things that can be extracted from those environments.
The Moore Park side, and I believe it was Greg that I had this discussion with, but I may be missing someone's contribution to this conversation. I apologize to that person, but I have on my back burner this idea of designating a couple streetlights at a strategic location in Moore Park, and just saying, hey, these are our 2 experimental streetlights. We have one little area where we have essentially a street, and then I would call a little street that's just separated by a sidewalk, and then buildings are actually off that little street. We like it because there's plenty of access to get to the lights, and there's no homes right there. And it's just one of those places that's okay, you want to go test out your device in the real world situation, like here's the simple paperwork and insurance, and these dates are available for you. just to try to, have that innovation center. I have not run that idea up my chain of command, but that was something that I thought, oh, it's actually relatively simple to do, and will help out the industry. Well, I didn't mention this too, but we are just about ready to finalize our actions on our technology scouting, being done by Brian Wendt and his team at Future Labs. And I'm just chasing down one department left about what technologies, if any, we will pursue from there, but it will not be zero. And hopefully we can get something kind of neat and fun and cutting edge out there.
Those are both great things. And the bigger picture is that Moore Park is championing the transition to that smart city by really being accommodating and interactive. So Brian Chong contracted that study from the Wentz and Future Labs to be able to really get a good idea of the lay of the land and what options were out there and what they could, identify as low-hanging fruit and those kind of things. So kudos.
I will say they did not find personal jetpacks for our police officers, though. That was a long shot, but they're not there yet.
How about for city workers?
I didn't think to ask. That's why we should always let police talk first, and then we'll say we want that too.
So just for a little bit of background, when you look at the military bases here and within the Department of Defense, the military value of these bases is an area called test and evaluation. The whole DoD seems to look at our region, our county, these bases for running their exercises, for looking at new technology and testing it. All we're trying to do is expand beyond what the military applications are for technology into smart city applications. If you take all of this recognition, all of this technology innovation that's occurring naturally, organically already through the military, and you widen the aperture a bit more and talk about public safety and smart city development, it could be a real economic boom. And so that's the vision. That's where a lot of this is trying to go, and some of the activities we're trying to leverage. And it's a big lift, but you can't do it without broadband infrastructure. That infrastructure is going to be foundational to all of this. And so we're trying to figure out how to connect these dots. Thank you, Brian and Greg, for sharing that. Other discussions as we go around the table. I suspect we will have a lot more to talk about next month. But it's been an interesting month. We're still waiting for the signatures for the ink to dry in SB4 and AB14, and that's going to probably, as that occurs, it's going to be, we're going to get a lot more clarity, I think. Just getting through the recall election is going to be stabilizing in terms of moving on and letting things start working their way through once again. And so I think we'll have a lot to talk about this fall.
Hey, Bill, one last thing. I know that we had a conversation about kind of building a coalition of advocates in Santa Barbara. So I know we have a few folks here from Santa Barbara. So that's something that look out for that calendar invite. We're going to be, as you mentioned, convening the most important and first step. So yeah,
I've been thinking more about that too, and now I'm glad you brought that up, because I do believe, I want to, as I mentioned to you guys earlier this week, the Tri-County conversation is an important conversation. We want to keep that and I think this is a good level for the conversation we had today, is at the Tri-County level. When you get down to the level of the Santa Barbara County, Ventura County, we're going to have to, I don't know, we call it a countywide steering committee, or, we're going to have to, for Santa Barbara's purposes, for where they want to go with their strategy in the next couple of months, it's going to have to be a stakeholder group unique to the Santa Barbara County for Santa Barbara County's issues. And hopefully they'll show up at this meeting and share what's happening in Santa Barbara County, the way the Ventura folks show up. But you're right. We need to have a uniquely Santa Barbara conversation for the Santa Barbara strategy, knowing that people like Terry are going to want to plug in and talk about where does Ventura County plug into the Santa Barbara conversation. So yeah, that's hopefully what BCPC will look like in coming months, but we've got to work to get there. I do have an action for for Randall and Monica to put together some names, and was hoping to do that in the next 48 hours before the end of the week for a starting point of what that group would look like in Santa Barbara County, and move forward with creating that stakeholder group for that strategy to be completed in Santa Barbara County.
I suspect you already have, but just in case you missed it, Bruce Stensley probably has a lot of contacts up there for that.
Yeah. And I'm going to take a lesson learned out of Jory's playbook. I mean, when you look at the folks that he's been convening, the water districts, all the municipalities, all of the providers. I mean, there is maybe the ad hoc, but there is a structure of a list of stakeholders that are unique to Ventura County that he relies upon and wants to communicate with on an ongoing basis. We need to have that in all three counties. Okay, anything else? Petra, stay tuned to the Guadalupe story. It's percolating.
Hey, Bill, this is Joe Corella.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for letting me join. Yes, Jory is a leader in convening all of those collaborations. We've talked a lot about external funding. I wonder if everyone on the call, if their municipalities have made decisions on how to allocate their ARP 9901 funding. Broadband, water, and sewer are the three permissible infrastructure uses. There's some advantages for using ARP funds for broadband. A, there's the long implementation timeline, and B, there's the exemption from NEPA compliance, not CEQA compliance, but NEPA, federal NEPA. So I'm just wondering if every municipality is in the process of making those allocation decisions, or is perhaps even decided. Thank you.
I mentioned, Moore Park, we have already had our first hearing and we'll make the decision late this year. I know Oxnard was having an internal discussion. As Joe said, there are pros and cons to using that money versus other pools of money. And they were, it was pretty close down the middle when I last chatted with them. The city of Ventura has already allocated theirs. And I don't know if broadband was in there. I suspect not. But they made that decision actually some time ago. I don't know about the other cities.
Thank you, Brian.
Joe, George here. The city of Ventura did not allocate any monies to broadband and have pretty much decided to use most of the monies internally to beef up IT systems. Very disappointing.
They are not alone. Thank you, George.
County is still evaluating their ARPA funding at the CEO's office level.
Okay. Brian, I'm gonna also queue you up for another leadership discussion. As I mentioned, I'm a student of organizational leadership and cultural change. And we talked about the 3 I's this morning of infrastructure and inclusion, and then the innovation piece. And Moore Park is one of the towns that have really moved out in that. I mean, and Brian has been able to facilitate all 3 of those conversations and integrate all 3 of those conversations. But he's very modest about that. He attributes it to the leadership that's occurred, on his council. And Brian, I just want to know if you're willing to share that, because I think it's a model that we're going to have to look at city councils everywhere. It's finding the right kind of folks at the highest levels of city government that really get how those 3 I's integrate across and pushing them forward.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the case. I mean, as city staffs, we get policy direction from our elected officials, and they can shoot us in any direction that they want. And, what gets on the front burner, what gets on the back burner is at their whims, so to speak. Here in Moore Park, we had literally a council member who made broadband deployment the key centerpiece of his election campaign. And he used that political capital to get us down this road. Getting forming an ad hoc committee from our council was the first thing. The second thing was getting a broadband strategic plan. Now we're implementing it. And we got so far down that road that snowball has grown that it's, we're so close to really, getting some major accomplishments on the ground. We've done a couple of them already. That, even though that council member is no longer on our council, the momentum is there and we're so close. And now it's generally understood on our council with our department heads that this is the direction we're going and we've come so far already. We just need to, cross that finish line at the end. But that certainly was, a big piece of it. And I will say the executive management here in Moore Park also, where we are, built for agility, we like to say. We can move very quickly. We cut through bureaucracy very well here, both internally and with our other governmental partners. So, those things combined have enabled us to move forward in this and a few other really important areas in municipal governance.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, these times are so busy, and every day, all these conversations are happening at the highest levels and then even at the local level. And I feel like we need a strategic retreat somehow, where we just kind of take a day or two and back away and figure out how do we look at what Brian's talking about and go to each city and provide the tools required to bring councils along the way they've come along in Moore Park. I mean, if we could help be a catalyst for that cultural change for leadership to become aware, I mean, that would be a good value proposition for us in education and development of civic leadership for broadband. That would be that would be important. And so I'll put that in the wish list for the next time we have our first strategic planning retreat. So other conversations before we adjourn? Shelby, thanks for joining us from the EDC in the North County. We did have some North County Santa Barbara discussions.
Yeah, sorry I was late. I have a meeting every other Thursday that begins at 8:30. But since it ended early, I was able to hop in today. So hopefully I can find a way to catch up on those North County updates. I don't know if this is relevant or part of it, but I did have a discussion with a couple of business owners in Los Alamos this last weekend who, broadband is at the front of their concerns.
It absolutely is.
I just thought I would drop in and mention that as well, that it's definitely on business owners' minds.
Yeah.
Valley.
Yep. And we've done a lot of conversations in Los Alamos. Hopefully the plans for the North County fiber ring will resolve that. But certainly between Charter, Comcast, AT&T, the players up in that area, it's on the map, and we need to get there and provide some resources to solve that problem. The community is very active too. I mean,
Yes.
in terms of that, you go down Main Street of Los Alamos, and those businesses are really banding together to talk about it and work on it.
Yeah, they're ready. They're ready to participate, actually.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. Any other conversations? Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate the time, and we'll look forward to staying connected.
Good meeting, Bill. Thanks.
Thank you.